mix together some cocoa powder, some plain flour, and then some baking powder, and that's it. So it's not complicated ingredients, it's fairly simple. Now, I have a question. Are all those ingredients easy to get hold of? Good! Because I tried really hard to make sure that everything was at least easily-ish achievable. So what we're going to do is pop this on here. Does that fit? There we go. So this is going to take a few minutes. So whilst I get started, has anybody got any questions to start off with? Because this is going to take a couple of minutes to melt, and there's nothing I can do for the minute.
Over there, at the far left, my far left.
Apparently I can't hear questions here, so I have to stand here. He's just coming to you, the mic. Yeah, I really can't hear you. If you shout, I might be able to hear.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I'm Raquel.
From?
Raquel. Okay, good evening. Sorry.
Good evening.
I said I'm Raquel.
I thought you were saying you were from, and I couldn't hear the second word.
No, I am Raquel. I have 2 questions for you. Personal questions.
Yeah.
Sorry. What was your first win? Your first hit that made you know you were doing the right thing?
I've always baked since I was a kid. It was one of the things I did with my family a lot when we were little. But the reason that I do it as a job was I was working in a bank, and I didn't enjoy the work. It wasn't day-to-day bank work. I was a debt collector, and I didn't enjoy that. I'm too nice for that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the right answer. And so I was doing what I loved every single day, and to get out of my little bubble, I would bake every night to try and kind of bring some happiness into my life. And I was actually surprised I was never fired, because I used to just spend all my day on the computer looking at recipes. And so it was kind of through that I started to think, oh, I have to bake for a living, because that's all I really, really love. And then obviously, so it doesn't show here, so I have to explain it. So the show that was mentioned that I was on is a show called The Great British Bake Off, and it's like a competitive cooking show on TV. And I never wanted to do TV at all, because I'm very shy. This is not, no, I'm joking. And so I was very shy, I promise. And so the reason that I did the show is because I thought it'd be something fun, but I never thought I would get on the show. So I went to do it because I thought, oh, I'll get to see an audition. And then, to my surprise, I got on the show and I won the show. And so it gave me this platform to kind of go, okay, what do you want to do with your life? And that was baking. So I kind of decided I wasn't earning any money from it. I wasn't really earning any money doing anything. But I gave myself a year to try and see if I could make a career out of baking. And that's my thing that I do every year. So if at the end of the year I'm paying my rent and I'm happy and I still enjoy it, that's why I keep going. So that's kind of my, why I do what I do. Thank you.
We cannot try that one in Nigeria here. You cannot leave what you are doing.
I didn't hear that bit, sorry.
No, don't worry, it's not for you. Forget it.
I didn't hear that bit either.
No, your second question. What's the biggest career challenge that you face currently?
My challenge?
Currently.
Ooh, that's a good question. Surprisingly, baking's not the easiest job to make a living from in the way that I do it, because I don't own a bakery. I write about baking a lot. I have cookbooks, and I write for magazines, and that's not necessarily always the easiest thing to make a living from. So just trying to figure out how to kind of continue the career and push it forward is always something that I think about a lot. But I'm very lucky. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I'm working all the time, so it's kind of, because I'm self-employed, I don't have employers, it's always that finding the next job. But I love what I do, so that's always what I try to reassure myself with, is that I'm doing what I love every single day, so it doesn't always feel like work, so I'm very lucky in that way. So I try not to get stressed, but that's not true, I get stressed all the time. So this is starting to melt now, so I need one of you, who's got a phone with a timer on them? Okay, lady with the orange and white, can't see. Set a timer for 5 minutes, and I need you to shout very, very loudly when that's done, because this recipe is very important. It needs to be exactly 5 minutes. So what you're going to do is you're going to have the chocolate unmelted. So you can see this is really nice and smooth, and there's no lumps of chocolate in there, there's no lumps of butter in there. So we're going to take that off the heat, and this is, so set the timer now, because now this has come off the heat. This is the important stage. So
How long would you say that was, Ed?
Sorry?
How long would you say that was on?
So it's exactly 5 minutes.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put the whisk on our mixer, and to that we're going to add our eggs and our sugar. Oops. And this needs to whisk for the exact 5 minutes. And the reason for this is we're going to add lots of air to this cookie, and if it doesn't have the air, we don't get the right texture from the finish. That was sugar, yeah, I thought I'd added the wrong thing then, which would be very bad. So we're going to lift that up. Huh?
They want to know what that is.
So what we've got in here is 2 large eggs and then some caster sugar and some light brown sugar. And all we're going to do is whisk that up for 5 minutes exactly, because we need to add a little bit of air to the mixture, because there's nothing much in this cookie. And so basically, as it bakes, what's going to happen is it will rise slightly and then it will separate and you get these beautiful cracks to it. And that comes from this exact 5 minutes of whisking. So I'm going to leave it in there for the 5 minutes. And we've come to another stage where I have nothing to do for a minute, so I'm just going to stand here and you can stare at me for 5 minutes. No?
I have a question for you. I've tried making chocolate with solid chocolate,
Yeah.
and I put it directly into the pot.
Yeah. So
You put it in a pan.
there's
and
an
put it
issue
on
with
top of
chocolate
the
is
pot.
it burns really easily, and the smell of burnt chocolate is truly disgusting. So you have to be really careful
Tell
with
me about
heat.
it.
So I generally don't put chocolate ever in the pan on its own. If you do, you have to put it on a very, very low heat and watch it really carefully. Or, same thing if you're going to use a microwave, you have to be really careful, because if it starts to burn, it's disgusting. So the best thing is a pan with a little bit of water on a low heat, let it simmer away, and just have it on a bowl over the top. And that way it can't burn, it won't catch, so it's fine. Yeah. So.
Perfect, thank
So
you
question
so
from
much.
this side, over there. Where's the microphone man? Where is he? Who's got the mic? I can't see him. There we go.
When I grow up, I want to be an actress
Okay.
and a writer. So can I still bake?
Yes. I was a baker long before I had any other career whatsoever. So I used to work in banking. I've basically baked since I was like this tall, because it's all that I ever used to do. So baking for me used to be my stress relief and my kind of relaxation. So I think baking is a really nice thing to have, even if you're not doing it as a job. And I think if you have a busy job or a stressful life, baking is that really nice thing that you can do at the end of the day, just to chill out. I always put some music on really loud. I dance around the kitchen, make sure no one can see, because I'm a terrible dancer. But it's a really nice thing to do regardless of what your job is. So the answer is yes, definitely, definitely.
Thank you.
Any other
My
questions?
name is Roro.
More questions? Was that a thank you?
Did that answer your question? Yeah? Perfect.
Good.
Do you have a question now?
Hello. My name is Rose. I want to know your weakness and strength as a chef. Yes.
Rude question, rude. No.
Yeah.
So I would say my biggest weakness is, so I love making things with yeast like bread, but there's a type of bread that I really love, but I'm just useless at making. So it's a type of bread called sourdough, where you don't use any commercial yeast whatsoever. You kind of collect yeast from the air, which weirdly exists, and you can make bread with it very slowly. But how many times I try, I struggle a lot. So I'm actually going on a course when I go home with some friends of mine to try and up my knowledge. Because one of my friends who used to be a pastry chef at the world's best restaurant, she once told me that as a chef, you should never ever stop learning, because if you think you know everything, you become a really bad chef. So for me, it's really important to make sure that I know as much as I can, so I'm always learning. I would say my strength is probably chocolate, because it's one of the things I work with the most. And it's a product that I just love to work with. But I'm also very inquisitive. I love trying things. So it might be rubbish, it might fail, but I really enjoy the process of trying it. And I think that's also a really good sign of a good chef, is someone who really likes to try things. 5 minutes, great. So if you want to have a look in here. Whoop. Did that wrong? Shh, no one saw, it's fine. So I'm going to take the whisk off, and if you can see, this has now become really pale, and that's added lots and lots of air to it. It's really nice and light. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to take another bowl, and to that we're going to add our flour. This is just plain flour, and then some baking soda, and then some cocoa powder. And this is just going to really increase that chocolate flavor. Cocoa's got a lot of depth, so it really helps to add strength to the recipe. And then we're just going to whisk that together to combine, just until it's roughly combined like that. And then what we're going to do is basically combine all three mixtures. So we're going to add our chocolate mixture first. Now, it's important that you see the bowl will have water on the bottom. If water gets into chocolate, it can become really grainy and thick and impossible to work with. So always clean off your bowl. And then this is where you're going to do one of those delicious looking things where you pour chocolate into the bowl. That's where you're all supposed to go.
That looks
Ooh.
amazing.
Say 3 good people at the front. So we're just going to mix that together. So the reason that 5 minutes was really, really important was that if you don't let this cool down enough, the chocolate mixture will be really, really hot. So when we add it to the egg mixture, it becomes really stiff and it won't work in the right way. So mix that together briefly for those few minutes just until it's nicely combined. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add our dry goods straight into the bowl and then just fold that together. There's not a lot of flour to the liquid goods, but you still want to be a little bit careful. If you add flour to the rest of your batter and then you beat it really hard, you'll end up with tougher, chewier cakes. So try and be nice and gentle and just fold that together. Now, at this stage with this recipe, you need to be a little bit careful. You have to work it really, really quickly, because if the batter sits for too long, it won't work. So you have to kind of let it work really nice and quickly. So now that is all mixed, we're going to use an ice cream scoop. So this is just all I'm going to use to portion out the dough, and it means that every single one of the cookies will be exactly the same size, and it's also just really easy and quick to work with. So all we're going to do, you went to the sink and it was boring. Let's go on to here. So you're going to take the scoop, and you're just going to scoop some of the cookie dough so that it's nice and level, and then you're going to turn it onto the tray and let it fall like that. So you can see it's very liquidy. For a cookie recipe, this is really, really liquidy, but this is much more of a brownie recipe than it is a cookie recipe. So just let that fall like that, and this will make in total about 10 to 12, depending on the size of your cookie scoop, like that. And then these are now going to go into the oven, and that oven will be set to 180 degrees Celsius, and they'll go in there for about 12 minutes, like that. So they're going to go in. Can we put those into the oven? Thank you very much. Can we set a timer for 12 minutes as well? And then you're going to take them out immediately. So that recipe will look really, really soft still when the cookies come out. But trust me, these are the most delicious things ever. Hopefully, they normally cool down in about 20 to 30 minutes. So by the time they come out, it should be at the end of the hour. And we should be able to let you try a couple of cookies, because otherwise that'll be really boring to come and watch a demo and not try anything. So hopefully we'll have some left. So what we're going to do now over here is show you another recipe. Actually, this is very, very simple. I just need to grab a couple of things. So this is going to be a chocolate and tahini Bundt cake. Has anyone heard of what a Bundt cake is? A few of you, good. So I'm obsessed with Bundt cakes. Actually, this is a Bundt cake. So this is just it's basically a cake with a hole in it. Has anyone ever seen that film, My Big Fat Greek Wedding? So that's my favorite reference to a Bundt ever, and I use it every single time because the woman doesn't know what it is, so she goes, a Bundt cake? A Bundt cake? I don't know what a Bundt, it's a cake with a hole. Anyway, it's my terrible Greek impression. That was really embarrassing. I'm not going to do that again. So what we're going to do is just grab this stuff. So this is just oil. There's nothing else in here, but it's a spray oil, and the reason we use it is Bundt cakes can have an issue with sticking. So you need to make sure you prepare the pan properly. So what we're going to do is just give it a nice even coating with the oil. I tend to do this near the sink purely because if you do this over here, it gets on the floor and you fall over. So over the sink is best. But because this is a chocolate cake, it's a little sticky, and so there's a chance that this will still stick. So we need to coat it in something else. So normally I would use flour, but because it's a chocolate cake, we don't want that white appearance on the outside of that really nice chocolate cake. So all we're going to do is dust it with a little bit of cocoa powder and just want a really thin coating. And the most important thing when you're doing this is this central column, because that is where the cakes always stick. So all you're going to do is tap the cocoa all the way around, like this, until the whole thing is coated. And then I'm just going to get rid of the excess here. And then because the cocoa can clump a little bit, and because we don't want lots and lots of it, all you're going to do is lightly tap out and more will come out. And you do the same with flour if you're going to use flour for like a normal kind of sponge too. But the actual cake is very, very simple. All we're going to do is take our wet goods and our dry goods, mix them together separately, and then combine them. So it's really, really easy. So in the ingredients, what we have, does anyone use tahini at all? No. Does anyone know what tahini is? A few of you. So who likes sesame seeds? Okay, you've all had tahini then, because tahini is just 100% sesame seeds that have been ground up into a thin paste. It's very hard to do at home, but I understand there's a Lebanese community here. Is that right?
There is.
Okay, and I was told yesterday there's a Lebanese supermarket. Is that right? Okay, good. Because you can buy this in any Lebanese supermarket whatsoever, and it is delicious stuff. You can use it as a dressing over salads. It's so tasty. It basically tastes like a... who likes peanut butter? Okay, it's like a sesame version of peanut butter. That's a much easier way of describing it. And that's going to be one of the flavorings of our cake. And the rest is going to be some chocolate, again, but this one just cocoa powder. We're also going to use can we get some water for the coffee? Grab some water for the coffee. Need the water in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some cocoa powder, some coffee, and this is not going to taste of coffee, but if you put coffee in a chocolate cake, it actually increases the chocolate flavor. It adds depth and strength to it, so it really helps with the recipe. And then we're going to add some buttermilk, which if you can't get buttermilk, all you need to do is add a little bit of lemon juice to some regular milk, and it will kind of give you that acidity that buttermilk gives. And then we're going to add some eggs, vanilla, and oil. And then to the other bowl, we're going to add our dry goods. So the first thing we're going to add is plain flour. And then this time we're going to use a lot of brown sugar, because the brown sugar, again, is going to really help give that kind of caramelly note. So add that to the bowl, along with some baking soda, and then our cocoa powder. Now, if you had a food processor, you could blitz all of this together, because the one thing you want to try and do is make sure that there are no lumps in this batter. If we got a bigger bowl, we get a bigger bowl. Because what we need to do is make sure that there's no lumps in there. So brown sugar can clump sometimes, as can cocoa powder. So if you have one, that's fine. Just pulse it in there for a few minutes, and it'll get rid of any lumps. But otherwise, just mix it together with a whisk like this, and then we combine our wet goods. So whilst I do that, has anybody got any more questions? What I'm going to do, just to let you know, is going to add some egg, the tahini, the milk, some vanilla, and we're just going to mix those together in a separate bowl, just to combine them. It's really with a whisk. There's no technical issues. You're not trying to get to any stage. Just whisk them through.
Okay, so we're going to take some questions now really quick. Hi, Ed.
Hi.
Hi, I have a little voice. Okay, so I had a question about chocolate.
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions myself, but I figured since you're an expert, you can answer.
Okay.
2 words, chocolate seasoning
Okay.
and tempering chocolate.
Okay.
If you can help explain that very quickly for people.
So, seasoning chocolate is what I mentioned about before. If you get any water in melted chocolate, it becomes this really thick, ugly paste. And there's nothing wrong with it. You can eat it, but it has a very odd texture, so it's best if you avoid it at all costs, because it will really mess up the recipe, and there's nothing you can do about it. So chocolate really doesn't like water most of the time. Tempering chocolate, if you buy a bar of chocolate and you break it, you know that snap that you get, and it has that crispness to it? That's because the chocolate's been tempered. If you just melt chocolate and let it set on its own, it will melt when you touch it with your hands, and it's just not as easy to work with. Plus, it will also have an issue where if you let it set, it'll go streaky. So you'll get these white streaks, and that's just the fat in the chocolate trying to separate it out. To temper chocolate, it's not difficult, it's just tricky. What you do is you have to melt it to 45 degrees, let it cool a few degrees, then rise it a couple of degrees. And you go through this process to make it tempered. But I would not do that today, because it's so hot in here that it just wouldn't work. It would be very, very difficult to do. So you do need a slightly cool space. So tempering chocolate needs a slightly cooler environment. So if you've got a kitchen that's a bit colder, that can really help. But otherwise, it's tricky to do. But it's something that some recipes need, but I try to avoid it because it's a little bit technical, but yeah.
Did that answer your question, or do you want to ask anything else? Okay. Do you want to ask a question?
Hello, Chef. Please, I want to ask you, as a shy type, how did you break into the cookery world?
Okay, good question. So because I was very shy, and I know I'm up here talking to like 600 of you, and that doesn't seem like I'm shy. I'm still very shy. I can be really, really shy. So I'm also not very good with people that I've never met, and this is actually quite useful, because if there was just one of you, I'd be really nervous. But because there's lights in my face, and there's 600 of you, it's very hard for me to pick out like an individual person, so it's fine. But I can be really, really nervous, but I was really lucky, because when I went to do the show, I genuinely never thought I would get on the show. So for me, it was a question of, I had to do it, I had no choice. So I was filming the show, and one of the presenters, I was being really nervous and a little bit shy, and one of the presenters came up to me while we weren't filming, and she took me aside and she went, "You have to stop that now, because you have this opportunity." So as much as I can, and my natural state is to kind of go hide in my room and not talk to anybody, I try to be as outgoing as possible. So it's almost like fake it until you make it. I'm often not very confident and outgoing, but my job demands that I have to be. So I kind of pretend that I am for an hour, and then I go back to my hotel room and just hide. So, but I pretend. It's a really good way of doing it, because eventually, as you start pretending, you'll suddenly find that you're a lot more confident. So, yeah.
I know a lot about that. We have loads of questions to ask you, so please be ready. Can we just have one question over here?
Okay. Hi, Chef Ed.
Hi.
Okay.
Hello.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
But
first, can I alternate vinegar, like white vinegar, instead of
The sugar?
No.
The flour?
Instead of the lemon juice.
Okay.
To make buttermilk.
So it can be anything that's acidic. So lime juice, lemon juice, not passion fruit juice, pineapple juice. Anything acidic will help the milk curdle. But if you can't get anything acidic to do it, there is a couple of things you can do. Actually, can you get sour cream? Actually, no, one thing you can use yogurt. So if you get a natural yogurt and add a little bit of milk to thin it down, that will also work perfectly fine. You just need something that has something acidic, because in the cake batter, we're using things that need the acid to help the cake rise. So it just needs some acid in there. So yeah, you could just use yogurt thinned down with a little bit of milk, and it'll be fine.
Okay. My second question, for the chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Okay, I have this recipe. I use mayonnaise. Like mayo.
Oh, mayonnaise?
Yes. Instead of sugar, I just the egg, milk, and the oil.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I always get this very light textured cake.
Yeah.
So I'm asking, can I still add chocolate, like melted chocolates to that?
To a mayonnaise cake, yes, you should be able to find. It depends on the recipe. So because I can't see the exact recipe, I don't know for sure what could be added to it. But I have a friend in the States who makes a chocolate mayonnaise cake, no problem whatsoever. Also, if your recipe already has flour in it, you could reduce the flour a little bit and replace that with the cocoa powder, because that will help give that chocolate flavor as well. So yes, absolutely, no problem.
Okay, then the third question. I have a problem about red velvet. I know you're not making red velvet, but I have a serious problem with red velvet. I hope you can solve it for me. Okay, whenever I use vinegar, it's I mix it with the red food coloring.
Okay.
I always get this 2 colors of cake. Like the red is at the top, and I get this very bitter brown cake.
So the bitterness is coming from the food coloring, because a lot of food coloring is very, very bitter. So you're using a really thin food coloring. That's kind of like one that you have to use quite a lot of for the red food coloring. Is it quite liquid?
Yes, it's liquid.
So the problem with a really liquid food coloring like that is that you have to add so much to the recipe to get the color that you want. But by adding all that, you then get the bitterness that comes from the food coloring. So the best thing you can do, if you can get it, which you might not be able to because it's not the easiest thing, is a food coloring called gel food coloring, and it's much, much more concentrated. So you only have to add a tiny amount, but it gives a lot stronger color, and so it won't separate out either because it's much more stable. So that if you can find one that's called either gel food coloring or paste food coloring, they're a lot stronger and they're just a lot better. So that would be what to look out for, sure.
All right, thanks, Chef.
No worries.
Okay,
so sorry, go on.
Sorry, 2 things. One, I know I said ask as many questions as you want, but please, let's try and
one per person, maybe.
Yes, 1 per person, so everyone can get a chance. Please, thank you so much. And 2, I probably did not add this, but we have 10 books to give away. So all the people who answer questions do get a book. So
how many people have asked a question, by the way? Because I've not been keeping track.
Thank you very much.
Hello? Okay.
I'm the one on the floor now, I hope. This is a very easy, basic question for you. You've been asking some very serious, they've been asking some very serious questions before now. So let me make life easy for you. Now, probably it's a gender issue, but I'm told gender, age.
I thought you were about to say it was an easy question. You were about to ask me about gender.
Easy. I'm told chocolate cake is healthier than brown cake, white cake.
Okay.
Is it true?
Is it heavier?
Heavier.
No.
Ooh.
Chocolate's really good for you. Dark chocolate's very good for you because there's a lot of antioxidants in it. But cake still has sugar and butter, so you kind of lose the health benefits. But I would say cake is good for you. I'm clearly very skinny.
Okay.
No lies. No lies. So I would say
let's
actually.
take it over here for a second so everyone kind of gets.
So a little bit of what you like, I think, is a good thing. I'd rather you enjoy a little bit of something rather than have nothing of it. So yeah.
Hi.
Do you do any vegan type cakes at all?
Vegan cakes?
Yes.
No, sorry.
Not at all. Do you do non-dairy?
I've done non-dairy. That's very easy to change. But vegan recipes, because you can't have egg, because you can't have a lot of things that go into the recipes, it's really tricky to do. So I would say the best thing you can do is actually find someone who's really, really good at it. Because if I try to do a vegan recipe, it might not be amazing. So yeah, I'm going to say sorry. I'm not very good at that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to pretend that I am. So I just want to very quickly say, all I'm going to do, so all I've done is taken all those liquid ingredients and all the dry ingredients and I've mixed them together and now we're just going to pour that straight into the tin. It's that easy. Very, very simple, very straightforward. So just pour that straight in.
Okay, hello. My question is this, for those of us who are starting on baking. I've noticed that part of your ingredients, baking powder hasn't been there. You've been mentioning baking soda. And I've not heard baking powder. Is there any reason why baking powder is not part of the recipe? And then 2, is there an alternative for the tahini?
So baking powder and baking soda are different things. So baking soda has baking powder in it, but it also has an active ingredient to help it react. So theoretically, you can use baking soda in place of baking powder, but you then have to change the recipe because it needs to have nothing acidic in it. So it's a really boring, sciencey thing. But if a recipe calls for baking powder, it's really tricky to do it without it. With experience, you can, but it's not a simple thing of just change this one thing. You have to redevelop the recipe, basically. So it is annoyingly really difficult. Are you saying you can't get baking powder here at all? I missed the first part of the question.
Sorry, I said, you actually didn't mention baking powder. We're used to having baking powder and baking soda as part of recipes.
Yes, so annoyingly they are separate things and you can't just switch them in and out. You have to use the one that's called for, otherwise the recipe just won't work. If you say add baking powder to this recipe, it won't rise in the same way. It still will rise a little bit, but baking soda is way stronger and so it'll rise a lot easier. So it's something you just can't switch in and out annoyingly. So it's something worth just having both in there because otherwise it just won't work at all, yeah.
Okay, so you just have one.
Just have both of them. You need to use both of them. But use the one the recipe calls for, yeah.
Okay, I want to ask another question, still on the baking powder. Okay, I noticed, I don't know how I think it has to do with my measurement, but I'm not too sure. So I noticed after using baking soda, I don't know if it's the baking soda, there was this salty taste at the end.
So baking soda can be really bitter because it has things in there that naturally taste really kind of gross. So some American recipes that use a lot of it can taste really bitter and kind of almost soapy. So my preference is American recipes tend to overdo that a little bit. So I tend to not use them just because it can taste it. But unfortunately, there are some recipes that use oil as its liquid base that need the baking powder to help rise it. And sometimes they can taste a little bit acidic and a little bit bitter. But annoyingly, there's not much you can do about it if the recipe needs it. It just might be that you need a different recipe. So use mine because they don't have it in. That's not true.
Okay, Chef Ed, you're very popular today, but let's take one more question so he can do what he needs to do. Just for now, we'll come back to everybody, please.
I'm going to show you something really tasty in a minute, so you want to see this.
Hi, Ed.
Hi.
So everyone's been asking about your baking techniques, and that's amazing. But I want to know how you dealt with the pressure of being in a competition environment and how you didn't compromise like the quality of your work.
So the pressure of the show was interesting because I'm not very good under pressure, or I didn't used to be very good under pressure. I'm quite happy you haven't seen the show because it's obvious in the show that I didn't deal with it very well. Let's just say that I might have cried a few times on national TV, which is great. It's a really odd situation because if you think, so the show is in a tent and it holds kind of kitchens like this, and we have 10 to 12 of them depending on how many people are in the show. And you've never been in that kitchen before, you've never met any of the people before, you've never been on a TV show before, and suddenly you've got cameras that are like 7 times the size of these little ones in your face, and a producer going, do this, do this, do this, and you're like, I don't know what to do. So it's very hard, but for me, the way I dealt with the pressure was to go, I know what I'm doing, I make all of this stuff all the time, it's not a problem, because this is what I do and it's what I really like. The show was a whole other thing, and I couldn't care less about it. I was there to make a little cake, make it as well as I could, and that was it. So I just tried to concentrate on that very moment and nothing else. And I think that's quite good. Huh?
That's probably why you won.
Hopefully. I think because I never thought I was going to win, I never went, oh, I'm so good, I'm going to win this. I was just like, I just want to do this one cake well, and that was fine. So I just want to show you very quickly. Oh, can we put those back on the tray just for a second so I can lift them up? Or can I lift them up? Oh, no, it's fine. So, these are the finished cookies. So I can't lift them up yet because they're too soft. If you, we're showing, there we go. Lift it up a little bit and down.
Can we get a round of applause for Chef Ed, please?
There we go. So that's why it needed the air in there, because they separate out like that, and you get that beautiful crinkle. So that's why we need that exact 5 minutes. So the chocolate cake is going to go in the oven for about 50 to 60 minutes. It's a long bake, but it's because it's a long cake. So I'm going to make another one for you. Well, how long have I got left?
You have about 34 minutes.
Oh, I really do speed through
Sorry,
that. Let's ask some more questions.
Minutes. 24
Let's
minutes.
ask some more questions.
I have a question over here.
My name's Titi. One thing I noticed is you're using just normal milk chocolate, correct?
Yeah, well, it depends on the recipe, yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering, is there, does it make any difference if you use the different kind of chocolate, like the white chocolate or dark chocolate?
It really does change the recipe a lot. So this recipe, for example, uses a 65 to 75% cocoa content dark chocolate. And the reason if you change that, the reason things would change is chocolate has obviously fat in it and sugar in it. So if you change this from a 65% dark chocolate to a 30% milk chocolate, you're adding way more fat, way more sugar. So A, they'll taste a lot sweeter. They'll spread a lot more because there's more fat, so it'll naturally spread more.
It changes the texture as
It will
well.
change the texture and the flavor. And these are already on the sweet side, so if you want to put milk chocolate in, it will just be super, super sweet. So, but the same with like a layer cake. So if you're making like a sponge and you change the amount of chocolate in there or the type of chocolate, it can just really change the texture. So you can change the chocolate a little bit, but you don't want to change it massively. So if it says dark chocolate, it needs to be dark chocolate, but you can change it a little bit. But also the percentage of the chocolate isn't about quality. So if you see a chocolate that says 70% cocoa, it doesn't mean it's good, it just means that's what's in it. So don't be fooled by anything on the labels. Use chocolate that you love the taste of.
Hi, Chef.
This uses 70% chocolate because of the fat content, not because it means good, yeah.
Hi, Chef. I'm over here.
Hello.
Thank you.
I could see the presenter and was like, there must be a very short person there somewhere. Sorry, go on.
Okay, so what's the secret to a really moist chocolate cake? Is
You're
it
about to see. Joking.
So what's the secret? What gives you that really moist chocolate cake texture?
I think there's a couple of things. So one, I think the real important with a lot of cakes, regardless of whether it's chocolate or plain or whatever, is to mix the batter correctly. So if you beat the cake again, it'll become dry, it'll become dense and heavy. So when you add flour to any recipe, very gently fold it in, and that will help create a moister, lighter cake, but also bake it for the right amount of time. If you put a skewer or a toothpick or something sharp into the cake as when you think it's done, if it comes out with nothing on it, then the cake's going to be quite dry. But if it comes out with a few moist crumbs, but not wet, just a few moist crumbs, that means that there's still moisture in the cake as well. But often it can also just be the recipe. If a chocolate cake is very simple, only has cocoa powder, it's probably going to be on the slightly drier side. So you want to use something that you can see from the recipe has moisture, either from added chocolate or there's buttermilk in there, or there's something that's adding that moistness. If it's just butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and cocoa powder, it's always going to be a little bit dry. So add something like the buttermilk because that will add moisture to the cake, or add melted chocolate because that will help absorb moisture as well. So it's just a question of using the right recipe and then baking it as well as possible. But yeah, that would be right.
Chef, let's make this very convenient for you. How many more questions are you willing to take before you move on to your next step, so we don't bombard you with too many questions and you're not able to
Let's do 3.
Okay.
And then we can
1,
ask more
2.
later, it's fine, but...
Hi, Chef. Hello.
This is very confusing.
Yeah, over here. I was just wondering, why baking for you, and what's your favorite recipe to bake?
So the reason that I bake, and I love to cook, I cook all the time, but I don't make a living from it. I'm just not as good at it. So baking is something that I've done since I was a little kid, and I find that I can look at most recipes and just fall into it very easily. But I've also been doing it as a career for 10 years, and I've been baking in my life, the 20 years that I've been alive. I'm 32. But it's just something that I just really, really love. And so I've always been a big advocate of saying, if there's something that you love and you can make a living from it, do it, because you'll never get bored of it. So that's the reason that I bake generally. Favorite recipe, I'm not sure, but this cookie recipe, so I posted it on Instagram about 3 weeks ago, and I thought it would be, fine, nice recipe, whatever. It was made 1,000 times within that first 4 or 5 days. It just blew up. So at the moment, I really love this recipe because other people seem to really like it. So I love this one. And it's so easy to make. That I love to make things that are really complicated, but sometimes something super easy like that is also lovely. So at the moment, it would be that one, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Chef. Hi.
Hi. See,
Yes.
waving helps. And also there's a light right on you. So
All right, my name is Bukola, and I want to ask you a question. This is my question. Apart from the timing which we follow initially and the accuracy of our measurement of our ingredients, what other kitchen rules do we need to follow that you can recommend as a baker?
Okay, so the biggest thing you can do in the kitchen to help do baking better is this. So if you see, the guys from the cooking school have helped, and they've weighed everything out before I start. So if I started a recipe and I'm going into the cupboard trying to find an ingredient, things will naturally go wrong. And also, half the time, you'll get halfway through a recipe and go, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. So it's really important to start, as you have started the recipe, get everything ready, because then everything goes easier, smoother, you make less mistakes. And it's actually a tip from every restaurant. If you go into any restaurant, they will do that before they start a recipe, because it's just easier. So that's a really useful thing to do for sure, yeah. Right.
Hi, Chef.
Hi.
My name is Chef Golam. I have 3 questions for you, sir. What is the secret of your success? 1.
I didn't hear that, and I think I heard something completely different.
What is the secret of your success?
What's the secret of your success?
Oh, I thought you were saying something about sausage. I was like, I really can't hear you. It's not a good thing. I would say that I think the reason that I'm good at what I do and I'm successful is the same thing that I was talking about earlier. It's about the fact that I love what I do. So I'll do jobs that don't necessarily make me any money, but because I absolutely love the idea of doing it. So I've been very lucky over the years that I've been able to do so many different things. But I think the reason people always come back to my recipes and to my YouTube and all that kind of thing is I'm annoyingly enthusiastic about everything that I do, because I love what I do. Like, I genuinely don't like anything more than this. So I think, again, that's a really important thing to do, is follow what you love, and you'll be good at it, hopefully, because you really, really love it, so you want to be better. So it sounds a bit rubbish, but it's true.
What can we use to preserve chocolate cake without rum?
To preserve chocolate?
Yes.
It's difficult because in the heat, chocolate won't last very long. So normally we wouldn't recommend you ever refrigerate chocolate, because it can do the same thing. It can draw the fat out. But
what is your advice for the upcoming pastry chef?
I would say for an upcoming pastry chef, the best thing you can do is go to a restaurant that you love their pastry, their baking, and just say, can I come work for you for a day for free? And just get experience in many places as you can, because that way you'll learn a lot more for sure. Right.
Okay, so after those 3 questions, sorry, we have one more question. I'm so sorry. One more question, and then he needs to do what he needs to do, and then we have more questions coming up. Please.
Okay, hi chef, my name is Jumoke. Hi.
Okay, please make it very quick, please.
All right, thank you.
Just 2 words. I'm joking.
I read online that if you don't have melted chocolate,
Yeah.
you could mix chocolate powder and butter. Do you recommend that, or just find and
No.
melt chocolate?
Simple answer, no. Only because chocolate isn't made up of just cocoa powder and butter, and it actually has no butter in it whatsoever. So when you make cocoa powder, what you're doing is pulling all the fat out of it, pardon me, so that it's just dry cocoa powder, but it's not the same thing as butter, so it won't work the same way. If you were making certain things like a buttercream, for example, that would be fine. But if it's something that needs the chocolate in there, it just wouldn't work. So you would just need to find actual chocolate, yeah. There are other things you can do with cocoa powder that are delicious, but you can't substitute it for actual chocolate. It wouldn't work, sadly, no. So what I'm going to do very quickly is show you how to make a really delicious cake. So this is, can I get a spatula? This is basically another cake. I broke that one.
Chef, please, can we have one more question before you focus on what you need to do, please? I'm so sorry.
Hello, Chef.
Hi.
So, May the 19th is round the corner.
Is which one?
May the 19th.
Yeah.
So, if you were asked to bake the cake for the Harry-Meghan wedding, what would
I do have something to
taste
say.
like?
So the person making the royal wedding cake is my friend. So adjacent. I'm going to claim the glory, but I'm not making it. I actually think that what she's chosen is really good because, thank you, the woman who's making it, Claire, she has a really modern style. She doesn't do kind of really old-fashioned looking cakes. And so I really like what she does. And so I think actually for the royal family, who are obviously very old-fashioned, very traditional, I think doing something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more modern is a really nice choice. So I'm really happy that she's doing it because her stuff is amazing, and she's just a really nice person. So I think what she's doing is really good. It's not necessarily my flavors, but I would probably do something with chocolate because I'm literally obsessed with it, and that's all I'm going to talk about. So very quickly, because we're running out of time, I'm going to add some caster sugar to some unsalted butter. And what we're going to do is beat that together. So this is a really classic recipe. This is what's known as creaming. So this is where the lightness of the cake is going to come from adding air to the butter and the sugar. And the reason that's going to happen is the sugar, with all those tiny little pieces, is going to knock lots of air in, lots of holes into the butter. And it'll become really, really light. Then for the actual rest of the cake, we're going to add some mint and some lime zest. Now, if you had a food processor, what I would suggest you do is put the sugar, the mint, and the lime in the food processor and blitz it together, because what it will do is the oil in the two things will start to leak out into the sugar, and it becomes super, super fragrant. So I'm just going to add that to the mixer now, and that will bring out some of the oil as well. And then meanwhile, what we're going to do is we're going to add our flour in a second and our eggs, like this. So because it's nice and hot, that butter's become really nice and soft and easy and pliable, so we can add our eggs straight away. Normally, if you were doing this, you'd want to beat the butter and sugar for about 5-10 minutes so it becomes really nice and light, and when you add the eggs, it doesn't separate and split out. But because it is nice and hot, we don't have to worry about that too much. So let's add our eggs. Also, if you can't tell, I'm rushing this recipe because I want to finish everything, and I want you to be able to taste everything. So once that's all combined, we're going to add our dry goods. So that is just flour and then some baking powder.
That looks amazing.
So this is super, super simple, but it's really fragrant. I love this recipe. So we're just going to add our flour mixture, like that. And now what I was saying before about mixing flour too much, this is where you would never turn the mixer on to full speed. You just want a low, medium speed, because that's much more like stirring. It's not going to beat the flour too much. You're not going to end up with chewy flour. So yesterday we went to, does anybody know White House? Okay, good. So I went to White House yesterday, and they taught me how to do the pounded yam. And so you know how the yam becomes really stretchy? That's what would happen, not quite, but that's kind of what would happen if you mix this for too long. So you want to ensure that you only mix it briefly so that it becomes still nice and soft and pliable. And then to finish this recipe, we're going to use some cream, and this is going to make a really rich sponge. If you don't have cream for this one, you can substitute this, no problem, with just milk. It's fine. It just won't be quite as nice texturally. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a loaf pan, and we're just going to pour that into here and pop that into the oven again for about an hour. I have never made this recipe this quickly, ever, but I'm trying to make sure we get it done. So you can see that finished texture is so silky and smooth, and that's because of the cream, but also the fact that we've beaten the butter and sugar properly. So what we're going to do is just scrape that into the bowl, into the pan, like that.
Also, remember, you can get all these recipes, all these ingredients on Chef Ed's Instagram story. That's The Boy Who Bakes.
Everything's The Boy Who Bakes. You can watch this cookie recipe on my YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again, just go to youtube.com/theboywhobakes. The recipe's there, and it's a really good recipe. So if there was any from today that I'd want you to try, it's the cookie recipe, because it's the easiest, and it's a chocolate cookie. It tastes really, really good. So that's going to go in the oven for about 55 to 60 minutes. And then the way to test this is done is just insert a skewer. If it comes out clean, it's done. What I'm going to do now very quickly, we're going to run out of time to make me do the one of the garnishes for the Bundt cake, but I'm going to do one of them. So as I make that, if you want to ask any more questions, go for it. It's going to be basically a glaze for the cake. So what we're going to do is, no, where are the glaze ingredients? Can we get the tahini one? Yeah. So what we're going to do is make some tahinis. 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to rush this. We're going to make some tahini, some icing sugar. Oh no, the other one, the tahini.
Sorry, we have 5 more minutes, so we don't have time for any questions right now. But if you do at the end of the segment, we will take your questions. He really needs to finish what he's baking. I'm so sorry. To taste. Chef Ed, can we get a taste of what you're baking?
Yes, we have everything finished, so you'll be able to try at least something of. Well, the 600 of you.
Can we get a few people to come up and taste some of what you've done?
So I'm not going to do it because I'll get in trouble. So I'm going to leave that to you. So if someone wants to come try the cookies, we've got those ready. So.
Okay, how? The bowl, the cookie dough, the dough bowl.
Clean out that bowl.
Okay. Chef Ed, they want to taste the dough, not actually the cookies. The cookies and the dough.
No, you can't try the dough because it's got raw egg in it, and I get told off if you eat raw egg. Cookies, we're doing cookies. Yeah.
The book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry, if you asked a question, I think we got beyond 12, so how are we going to do that?
The first 10 people to have answered questions get the books.
Yeah, so if you're in the...
Please be honest.
How are you going to
Can I quickly ask? Okay. Hello?
You definitely...
Please, I would like to ask very quickly, please. You laid... Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Thank you. I've been trying to ask since. Please, you laid something on the tray before the cookies. I would like to know, can we use an aluminium foil?
A foil?
Yes, a foil.
You could do. The only reason you would glaze something on a tray is if it's going to drip a lot. So with this one, it doesn't drip a lot, so you don't need to use the tray. If it's something where you're coating the whole thing and using quite a liquid one, it will fall off. And so the reason for using the rack is it won't pool around the cake. But if you put it on the foil, it's fine. You just have to move it off the foil quite quickly so that the stuff that falls off the cake is still on the foil. But yeah, you could. You just have to work a little quickly with it. But it would work, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so anyone who asks questions, I'm hoping there are not that many. If you ask questions, please walk up to the chef at the end of the segment to get a book. The first 10 people, please be as honest as possible. We'll remember. We just need to see faces.
So what I'm doing now is just going to very quickly make a glaze for this cake. So I'm just mixing more of the tahini with some icing sugar, some vanilla, and just mix that until it's nice and smooth. And then what we're going to do is pour that all over the cake, and it will grip the sides of it. And then we'll finish it with a little bit of sesame seeds. So, even though you're probably not going to get a book this time, does anybody want to ask a question? Just to ask a question. Okay.
Sorry, that's at the end of the segment. I'm sorry, the end of the segment, not right now.
I thought everybody was just leaving. I was very depressed.
Sorry, no more questions for now because Chef Ed needs to finish what he's doing, so we keep to time. We only have about 5 more minutes, and we need to keep to that. Not right now. Maybe at the end of the segment. I'm very sorry, but there isn't enough time.
So all I'm going to do is pour that glaze.
I'm very sorry.
Like that. And it will drip down, and it might pool a little bit because it's probably not got quite enough icing sugar. But what we're going to do to finish, because I haven't had time to make the garnish, which would normally be a mixture of sugar, we're going to finish that with some more sesame seeds. There we go. So
how amazing does that look?
It's not a difficult recipe, I promise, but it is so delicious. So just to say about the lime cake, what we would normally do, I might try and make it very quickly, but with the heat, it's not going to work properly. So what we would normally do with this one is this is the loaf when it comes out of the oven. What you then do is take equal parts lime juice and sugar and just boil it together just for a minute or two, and then you pour it all over the cake. It soaks in, and it creates a really strong flavor. And then, if we had time, what I would then do is make a really simple milk chocolate glaze. So we'd melt some milk chocolate, add some cream, and then pour that all over the cake, and it's so delicious. We have run out of time, so I'm not going to be able to do that, but thankfully, this is delicious on its own anyway, so it's not a problem.